You see, I am a simple college student living alone in an apartment. I was very enthusiastic about the release of Pokémon Heart Gold and Soul Silver here in the States. I have purposely locked myself out of all media and the internet aside from school purposes. That means no 4chan, no V, no Bulbapedia, etc. As I was busy with the school year and being poor at the time, I wasn't able to buy Soul Silver on its launch date. After my school year ended, I ordered Soul Silver on Amazon. However, it would take a week for it to arrive. I decided that during that time, I would replay my Crystal version on my Game Boy Color. However, I realized that long ago, my mom threw it away because I told her the save went dead, and I was very upset about it then. She also threw away my Silver version, so all I have is my Game Boy Color. As such, I set out to GameStop and bought a used Silver version, as it's the only Pokemon game left that they have for the GBC. $10, fairly cheap. I went home and started it up for a nostalgia trip. However, that's where things started getting bizarre, and most likely the reason why you read this. The GameFreak logo started up as normal, but it just froze there. I thought the cart was just glitched or something, so I turned it off and on. The same thing happened. I tried pressing A and start over and over, and all of the buttons. Eventually, the logo vanished and there was a black screen for about 5 seconds. Suddenly, rather than going to the usual menu screen, I was already in the game in a previous saved file, which was odd as I was expecting all of these carts to have been wiped by the poor battery. Either way, I wasn't complaining, as I would have chosen the continue option to see what the previous guy did anyways. First off, I checked his trainer information. His name was just ... He didn't have much originality. I checked his profile and apparently he had 999 hours and 59 minutes put into the game, with all 16 badges, 999,999 Pokédollars, and all 251 Pokémon on the Pokédex. Seeing as he apparently had Mew and Celebi logged also, I am guessing he either used a Game Genie or was a really hardcore Pokémon player back then. I checked his Pokémon to see what a badass team he has. To my surprise, I saw 5 unknowns and a 6th Pokémon named Hurry. I'm thinking that this must be some cruel joke by the person who last played this game, but I decided to check the profiles of those Pokémon anyways. As expected, they were different letters of unknown, all level 5. I was a bit shaky with my unknown alphabet at the time, but I identified the words spelled out to be leave. As for the 6th Pokémon, it turned out to be a Cyndaquil, mind you, this is before there were individualized Pokémon icons. The Cyndaquil looked normal, but it was level 5 with only 1 HP left with only 2 attacks, Leer and Flash. I don't know why they named him Hurry, but at the time, I just disregarded it. The most eerie thing was that, despite my volume being at max, none of the Pokémon he had said their usual cries. Just pure silence. Having enough of the team, I closed it. I was inside what appears to be a room inside Bellsprout Tower. However, for some reason, there were no NPCs around. Even more eerie was that the pillar in the middle didn't move at all, as if just leaning on its side. There was no music at all, and there was no exit or ladder, or at least I thought there wasn't. I walked around for a few minutes but can't seem to find a way out. This was certainly not a room I've seen in the Bellsprout Tower before. I tried checking my items for an escape rope, but the bag was completely empty. There wasn't any wild Pokémon either. Finally, I managed to find a ladder, which turned out to be behind the pillar. The screen turned black and the music finally started playing. I had a sudden chill, as I recognized that melody I heard to be the theme you hear when you listen to the radio at the ruins of Alph where the unknown are at. I immediately realized that it wasn't a loading transition, but rather I was in a dark room and would need flash. Before I took care of that though, I immediately checked my Pokégear to change the radio to something more pleasant, but it turns out that there was no radio card, or even a phone nor time cards. There was only a map card in which Gold, from earlier, and I will call him Gold from now on, was just walking in a midst of black. I recall that Cyndaquil has flash, so I turned off my Poke Gear and made Cyndaquil use Flash. I didn't see any message saying Hurry has used Flash, or anything like that. The room just became lit just like that, and I soon regretted it. The room was a chilling blood red with a linear gray path heading south. The ladder I used to go up and down was not there at all. I had no choice but to head south. The screen got darker every 20 steps I made, until I finally made it to the end, which appears to be a sign. I read the sign, which said turn back now. Suddenly, I was asked to answer yes or no, but there was no question asked. I chose yes as I do not know what it was asking, and the screen went black again, making a ladder climbed sound. The unknown radio music stopped, and in a few seconds was replaced with the not as creepy Poke Flute radio music. I was in another dark room, but I held my breath and used Flash again. Suddenly, it said that Hurry has fainted, which was odd since I recall that there was no status conditions like poison on him, and I clearly wasn't in a battle. I checked my Pokemon quickly and suddenly he's no longer in my party. In fact, after a bit of investigating, none of my Pokemon are there, but instead all replaced with level 10 unknown. I did the same thing as before and spelled out the unknown. My then team of unknown spelled he died. Either way, after that creepy change, the room was lit to reveal myself in a very small room that appears to be only 4 squares big. The walls of that room were gray bricks, as if I was inside something that was hollowed out. Outside that room appears to be a bunch of graves similar to the ones in Pokémon Red and Blue. I've walked around that small room and pressed A, but nothing happened. I've already concluded that this was clearly a hacked game and some sadistic freak sold it to GameStop. However, my curiosity kept me going. I checked the trainer profile of again only to find out that the Sprite of Gold was missing his arms. He also seems to appear less smug, but rather seems more sad and empty in a way that I do not know how to describe. For some reason, it also now said that he has 24 badges, which was clearly impossible. After a few minutes of aimless wondering, my character suddenly spun and did the escape rope spinning animation. Instead of flying up though, my character spun downwards slowly, as if sinking. After that screen, the music stopped. After finally landing, the overworld Sprite of Gold is colored differently now. Instead of the usual red color he dons, he appears completely white now, including his skin. It's as if he came straight from the colorless Game Boy games, placed into a colored background of the Game Boy Color. I checked his profile, and now, while now is as white as his overworld sprite, he lost his legs and has what appears to be bloody tears from his eyes. It also says he now has 32 badges, which now starts to disturb me as this change of number seems to represent something important. I also checked my Pokemon, which this time contains 5 unknowns and a level 100 Celebi without a nickname. The unknown are this time leveled 15 and spelled out dying. I checked the Celebi's profile. It was a shiny Celebi, except there's only half of the sprite. 1 leg, 1 arm, 1 eye. It only has 1 attack, Perish Song. The area I was in itself was the Sprout Tower with the immobile pillar as before, except everything is apparently red now. I walked north for what felt like forever. Eventually, I finally encountered some generic men and women NPC. They were all lined up to the side just facing the long slantish pillar in the middle. They were also white, and nothing happens when I try to speak to them. I kept on going north until eventually the pillar finally appears chopped off, with a transparent red in that spot. I went up to red and without even pressing A, I was suddenly engaged and finally in a battle. The music starts again, which it sounds like the unknown radio music again, but played backwards. Gold's battleback sprite matches his front one with the bloody eyes, white skin, and lack of arms, while Red's sprite was the same as before in GSC, except transparent. The text simply said wants to battle, as if he has no name, and both of us only have 1 Pokemon each, which is weird as I swore I had 6 with the unknowns. My shiny Celebi came out, conveniently with half a sprite for the back sprite also. The shiny noise and animation was different, as the sounds it made sound like multiple screech attacks used consecutively. Red sent out a seemingly normal male Pikachu. Except he is level 255 and his sprite seems sad and has tears in his eyes. Rather than the usual fight item PKM end run menu, I was only given the option to use the attacks. Since Celebi only has one, I chose it. Naturally, since Pikachu was level 255, he went first. Pikachu used Curse, lowering his speed and increasing his other stats. I'm not even sure if Pikachu could use Curse. Celebi used Perish Song. In 3 turns, both Pokemon get KO'd, not like I have a choice. At this point, it didn't even go back to the fight menu, as the battle just continued without me. Also note that there were no animations at all for some reason. Pikachu used Flail, which didn't do much damage despite his level and boost as his health was maxed. Celebi used Perish Song. Nothing happens as it was already used. Pikachu used Frustration, which did a crap ton of damage, knocking Celebi down to less than 10 HP. Celebi used Pain Split, which surprised me as Celebi didn't even have that attack in the first place. Now Celebi and Pikachu have about 150 HP, Pikachu used Mean Look. Not like that did anything. As expected, due to the effects of Perish Song, my Celebi fainted. Except in the text, it said Celebi has died, and instead of the ordinary drop off the screen animation, the Celebi backsprite just vanished. For some reason, the Pikachu was still up even with Perish Song and it didn't count as my loss. Pikachu used one more different attack beyond the 4 attack limit. Pikachu used Destiny Bond. Afterwards, it said Pikachu has died, with a slow fade-out animation. Apparently, I was the winner as the transparent red sprite showed up and said ... At that point, I just freaked out, as that transparent red sprite was suddenly beheaded, leaving nothing but his transparent body. The battle then ended at that point and faded out along with the music. I'm back in the overworld, with another change to the gold sprite. He's now as transparent as Red's overworld sprite. I quickly checked Gold's profile, where this time the only thing that remains of him is his head, with a transparent skin. The head was zoomed in a bit, showing a black void in his eyes. It now stated that he now has 40 badges. I then backed out and checked my Pokemon. They were all level 20 shiny unknown, which when spelled out, read no more. I was at what I now know is next to the end. There was apparently no music playing, but for some reason I still felt like something was there that could be heard. I was back in my room in New Bark Town. Maybe finally I get to play this game properly, but who am I kidding? I knew that sadistic freak must have done something. I walked around my room to interact with things, as I'm a bit afraid to go down the stairs to see what was awaiting down there. Note I said walked, as while the background was moving, Gold was not moving his transparent limbs at all while doing so, just floating like those ghosts you see in Diamond and Pearl. As expected, the radio, computer, and TV did not work, so I had no choice but to go down the stairs. I ended up in the same lower level room of my house. Everything appears normal, except Mom isn't home. After failing to interact with anything in this room, I decided to go outside. To my surprise, that door leading outside at the south didn't work, and instead I just walked straight through it to avoid. I continued moving south to see what the hell was going on. My house vanishes as I head south into the void. It was creepy as when I entered the void, the outline on Gold's transparent sprite turned white to contrast with the pitch black. Eventually, I reached a white area and Gold's sprite turned black and transparent again. I continued south without thinking of stopping at all. After a long trek south, I finally encountered something. It was Gold's regular sprite. I talked to it. He said goodbye forever, ... Notably with a space in between the forever and ... and vanished. As that happened, it said, ? Used Nightmare, which at that point, I would not deny that being possible. Gold did another escape rope animation, spinning slowly downwards like before. I'm now back into that small hollowed-out room surrounded by graves earlier. Or at least I say I was back there, as there's no sprite anymore. I tried to walk around but nothing moved, not even wall-bumping noise. I checked my trainer profile with absolutely no gold sprite left. It said I have 0 badges and all the pictures of the Johto gym leaders at the bottom were replaced with skulls. I checked my Pokémon, which were all level 25 unknown. As expected, it spelled out a phrase that I dared to read, I'm dead. As soon as I went back to the overworld, the room I supposedly was in was then covered with the same blocks as the walls. I then figured out what exactly that room was when the final text was said, RIP. That room was a big grave, surrounded by other graves. Gold has already been dead. He died presumably a few years after he defeated Red. He was a young trainer who, despite his efforts in collecting so many badges and attempts at becoming a Pokémon master, was still unable to avoid the inevitable fate of death, and his efforts were eventually forgotten by the next generation. I was unable to escape from that text no matter what I pressed. I tried resetting the game, and the same thing happened, at which I then finally decided to give up on that horrible nightmare. After that experience, I will never look at the gimmick unknown the same way again. They say that only the first generation games have folk tales and legends, but the second generation has taught me how unpleasant the truth can be. I eventually enjoyed Soul Silver immensely, but I still can't forget what that hacked game has shown me. I'm what you could call a collector of bootleg Pokémon games. Pokémon Diamond and Jade, Chaos Black, etc. It's amazing the frequency with which you can find them at pawnshops, Goodwill, flea markets, and such. They're generally fun, even if they are unplayable, which they often are. The mistranslations and poor quality make them unintentionally humorous. I've been able to find most of the ones that I've played online, but there's one that I haven't seen any mention of. I bought it at a flea market about 5 years ago. Here's a picture of the cartridge, in case anyone recognizes it. Unfortunately, when I moved 2 years ago, I lost the game, so I can't provide you with screen caps. Sorry. The game started with the familiar Nidorino and Gengar intro of Red and Blue version. However, the press start screen had been altered. Red was there, but the Pokémon did not cycle through. It also said Black version under the Pokémon logo. Upon selecting New Game, the game started the Professor Oak speech, and it quickly became evident that the game was essentially Pokémon Red version. After selecting your starter, if you looked at your Pokémon, you had in addition to Bulbasaur, Charmander, or Squirtle, another Pokémon, Ghost. The Pokémon was level 1. It had the sprite of the ghosts that are encountered in Lavender Tower before obtaining the Sliff Scope. It had one attack, Curse. I know that there is a real move named Curse, but the attack did not exist in Generation 1, so it appears it was hacked in. Defending Pokémon were unable to attack Ghost, it would only say they were too scared to move. When the move Curse was used in battle, the screen would cut to black. The cry of the defending Pokémon would be heard, but it was distorted, played at a much lower pitch than normal. The battle screen would then reappear, and the defending Pokémon would be gone. If used in a battle against a trainer, when the Pokeballs representing their Pokémon would appear in the corner, they would have one fewer Pokeball. The implication was that the Pokémon died. What's even stranger is that after defeating a trainer and seeing Red receive $200 for winning, the battle commands would appear again. If you selected Run, the battle would end as it normally does. You could also select Curse. If you did, upon returning to the overworld, the trainer's sprite would be gone. After leaving and re-entering the area, the spot, where the trainer had been would be replaced with a tombstone like the ones at Lavender Tower. The move Curse was not usable in all instances. It would fail against ghost Pokémon. It would also fail if it was used against trainers that you would have to face again, such as your rival or Giovanni. It was usable in your final battle against them, however. I figured this was the gimmick of the game, allowing you to use the previously uncapturable ghosts. And because Curse made the game so easy, I essentially used it throughout the whole adventure. The game changed quite a bit after defeating the Elite Four. After viewing the Hall of Fame, which consisted of Ghost and a couple of Pokémon I used for HMS, the screen cut to black. A box appeared with the words "Many years later." It then cut to Lavender Tower. An old man was standing, looking at tombstones. You then realized this man was your character. The man moved at only half of your normal walking speed. You no longer had any Pokémon with you, not even Ghost, who up to this point had been impossible to remove from your party through depositing in the PC. The overworld was entirely empty, there were no people at all. There were still the tombstones of the trainers that you used curse on, however. You could go pretty much anywhere in the overworld at this point, though your movement was limited by the fact that you had no Pokémon to use HMs. And regardless of where you went, the music of Lavender Town continued on an infinite loop. After wandering for a while, I found that if you go through Diglett's cave, one of the cuttable bushes that normally blocks the path on the other side is no longer there, allowing you to advance and return to Pallet Town. Upon entering your house and going to the exact tile where you start the game, the screen would cut to black. Then a sprite of a Caterpie appeared. It was replaced by a Weedle and then a Pidgey. I soon realized, as the Pokémon progressed from Rattata to Blastoise, that these were all of the Pokémon that I had used curse on. After the end of my rival's team, a youngster appeared, and then a bug catcher. These were the trainers I had cursed. Throughout the sequence, the Lavender Town music was playing, but it was slowly decreasing in pitch. By the time your rival appeared on screen, it was little more than a demonic rumble. Another cut to black. A few moments later, the battle screen suddenly appeared. Your trainer sprite was now that of an old man, the same one as the one who teaches you how to catch Pokémon in Viridian City. Ghost appeared on the other side, along with the words "Ghost wants to fight." You couldn't use items, and you had no Pokémon. If you tried to run, you couldn't escape. The only option was fight. Using fight would immediately cause you to use struggle, which didn't affect Ghost but did chip off a bit of your own HP. When it was Ghost's turn to attack, it would simply say, eventually, when your HP reached a critical point, Ghost would finally use curse. The screen cut to black a final time. Regardless of the buttons you pressed, you were permanently stuck in this black screen. At this point, the only thing you could do was turn the Game Boy off. When you played again, New Game was the only option. The game had erased the file. I played through this hacked game many times, and every time the game ended with this sequence. Several times I didn't use Ghost at all, though he was impossible to remove from the party. In these cases, it did not show any Pokémon or trainers and simply cut to the climactic battle with Ghost. I'm not sure what the motives were behind the creator of this hack. It was widely distributed, so it was presumably not for monetary gain. It was very well done for a bootleg. It seems he was trying to convey a message, though it seems I am the sole receiver of this message. I'm not entirely sure what it was, the inevitability of death? The pointlessness of it? Perhaps he was simply trying to morbidly inject death and darkness into a children's game. Regardless, this children's game has made me think, and it has made me cry.